Imagine waking up one morning to find a $500,000 dock being built right in the center of your private lake. No warning, no request, just an HOA president acting like she owns the world, including the water that's been in my family for generations. She's constructing a $5 million cabin right on my land without even bothering to ask. I knew I couldn't just sit back and watch it happen. You'd think someone like that would hesitate. Not a chance. But what followed? You won't believe it. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know what you think. My name is Wyatt Mallister. I'm 39. And I retired early after selling my engineering company that specialized in log cabin designs. The sale brought in more money than I ever dreamed of, and I left city life behind to live in peace by a private lake I inherited from my grandfather. The nearest neighbor is a good half-mile away. Life out here was simple. I fished when I wanted, read whenever the mood struck, and enjoyed the kind of silence most people only get on vacation. At least, that's how things were until one spring morning changed everything. That day, I woke to the roar of machinery across the water, and not just any kind of bulldozers, excavators, and what sounded like a full-blown construction crew barking orders at each other. I threw on some clothes and stepped outside, trying to make sense of the chaos. What I saw made no sense at all. A massive dock easily worth $500,000 was being built on my lake. At first, I thought I was dreaming. I rubbed my eyes, stepped closer. A broken bar, but it was real. There it stood, glinting under the sun like it belonged there. But this wasn't a little fishing dock. It was huge, at least 100 feet long and 20 feet wide, multi-tiered, with enough room to park a full-sized yacht. Built with high-end materials, treated wood, stainless steel railings. It was the kind of extravagant project most people couldn't afford for their homes. There I was, still in my pajamas, coffee in hand, staring at this monstrous thing rising from what had always been my private lake. The usual quiet birds chirping, soft waves lapping was completely drowned out by the engine noise. I kept asking myself, what is this doing here? Because let me be clear, this wasn't some public waterway. This lake had been in my family for 3 generations, and the property documents clearly proved it. Then I saw her, a woman in her mid-50s, standing at the edge of the dock, clipboard in hand. She radiated authority and arrogance. The kind of person who thinks money gives them the right to ignore everyone else. The kind who talks down to service workers and expects the world to bend around their preferences. Trying to stay calm, I made my way around the lake to the site. I introduced myself politely and asked what, exactly, was going on. She looked at me like I was some clueless intruder daring to interrupt her grand plans. This is now community waterfront, sweetheart, she said in that syrupy, condescending tone that made my jaw clench. I'm just beautifying it for everyone's enjoyment. I took a breath and calmly explained that this was a private lake from Lisa and she didn't have permission to build anything on it. Her response? She actually laughed, out loud, like I'd told her the most ridiculous joke imaginable. You're mistaken. This dock has full approval from the HOA. All the paperwork's in order. I'm sure we can come to some sort of agreement that works for everyone. But when she said everyone, it was obvious she only meant herself. There was someone else nearby who witnessed our exchange, and she would later prove to be a key player in this story. Rachel Doyle, a retired school teacher who lived in a cozy cottage between my home and the construction site. She mostly kept to herself, but she was always kind when we crossed paths. After the woman walked off, Rachel came over quietly and pulled me aside. I saw her burning some papers last week, she whispered, checking to make sure the woman couldn't hear. Looked like official notices, maybe government documents. The flames were green, a broken bar, the kind that come from mink used on legal papers. I didn't know what to think just yet, but I filed that away. Rachel didn't strike me as the type to make up stories or stir drama. She paid attention to details, and that counted for something. That afternoon, I stood at the edge of my land and watched the construction continue. The dock stretched farther and farther into the lake. The workers moved fast, like they were racing the clock trying to get everything built before anyone could intervene. I kept replaying the woman's words, community waterfront and HOA approved. The nerve of it. She was essentially telling me to my face that she was claiming my lake, and there was nothing I could do. As I stood there, one thought consumed me. She thinks this is already over. I didn't know yet if I should follow the law and handle this through legal channels or start handling it my own way, but as I climbed the hill back to my cabin, a disturbing idea crept in. What if she was right? The next few days, I dove deep into every file I had related to the lake. I researched land and water rights, looking for anything that could give her an inch of ground. What I found reassured me. The documentation was airtight. The lake and every inch of it, from the shoreline to the midpoint, was mine. No loopholes, no joint access, no shared community clause. It was 100% private property. I spent the morning marking off property lines, photographing the shoreline, documenting angles, gathering everything I'd need if this turned into a fight. I spent the next morning mapping out every inch of shoreline, staking flags, taking photos, documenting every angle like I was preparing for a siege. At first, I felt like a cranky old guy chasing ghosts, but the deeper I dug, the more I realized this wasn't some misunderstanding. Someone was counting on me to stay quiet. Armed with facts and crystal clear documentation, I decided to give Anna one last chance to back off peacefully. I wrote a calm, respectful letter attached all the legal records showing that the lake, dock, and water rights were mine, and explained that while I understood she'd bought lakefront property, what she was building extended into water she didn't own. I even offered to talk through a compromise if she approached things with respect. I thought I was being incredibly generous, considering she had already driven a construction crew halfway into my family's lake without a single conversation. But instead of a handshake or a civil reply, what I got back was a letter from a high-priced law firm in the city. Not just any firm either, the kind with gold-embossed logos and intimidating language crafted to make regular folks shut up and back down. The letter accused me of harassment and intimidation, claimed I had caused Anna severe emotional distress by politely asking her to stop trespassing, and then came the kicker: they demanded $20,000 in damages for psychological trauma. I read that letter 3 times. I couldn't believe it. She was stealing my lake, and I was the one being accused of threats. It was like stepping into some kind of upside-down world. But Anna drama nest wasn't done. Over the next few days, she launched a full-blown campaign to make my life miserable. First, she plastered no trespassing signs along the shoreline, even on land that clearly belonged to me, according to the survey markers. When I called her out, she claimed there must be a mistake in the property boundaries. Then she hired private security, not just some sleepy local patrol guys, either. These were muscle-bound guards in tactical vests, the kind you see outside political rallies or celebrity homes. They blocked paths, asked for ID, and demanded to know why I was trespassing on my own land. One afternoon, as I was filming the southern shoreline for evidence, a dark SUV with tinted windows rolled up, idled for a minute, then drove off slowly. It didn't take a genius to figure out the message: "We see you, stay quiet." And just when I thought it couldn't get more twisted, she filed a false police report, accused me of stalking her. Never mind that she was the one invading my land. According to her, I was some obsessed lunatic who couldn't stand that she had every right to build whatever she wanted, wherever she wanted. Thankfully, the local sheriff's department wasn't buying her act. They came out, looked at the property lines, and realized exactly what was going on. But still, the fact that she was willing to lie to law enforcement just to cause me trouble, that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about a dock. This was a war. I had tried being the nice neighbor, tried giving her the benefit of the doubt, tried being rational and respectful. But the more reasonable I was, the more aggressive Anna became, like she smelled kindness as weakness. So I stood in my kitchen, stared out the window toward the lake, and said it out loud: "All right, Anna, you want war? Let's play." I didn't know exactly what my next move would be yet, but one thing was certain: I wasn't letting her bulldoze my family's legacy. My grandfather spent his entire life working to buy this land and leave it behind for future generations, and I'd be damned if some arrogant woman with deep pockets and a clipboard was going to steal it out from under me. Then I stumbled on something interesting. Buried in the construction permits she filed, there was a section marked Waterfront Construction Consent. It wasn't just improperly filled out, it was blank. Not misfiled, not mistaken, completely empty. As if someone had deliberately left it that way. hoping it'd slide past unnoticed. That detail felt important and maybe even enough to bring her entire project crashing down, but I wasn't sure how to use it yet. One thing was clear, though. I was going to need help. That night, I rechecked the locks on every door. I wasn't scared, I was awake, because something had shifted. This wasn't about land anymore. This was about drawing a linea and holding it. Rachel turned out to be far more helpful than I'd expected. A few days after our first chat, she knocked on my door with a serious look in her eyes and information that completely reframed everything I thought I knew. "I've been thinking about what I saw," she said, settling onto my porch with a mug of coffee. It wasn't just that Anna was burning papers. I overheard her on the phone arguing with someone about missing permits. She literally shouted, just build it, I'll handle the paperwork later." Loud enough that I heard it from my garden. That was exactly what I needed, an eyewitness hearing her admit she was ignoring the permit process altogether. I didn't want to get involved, Rachel continued, but the way she's been treating you, a broken bar, someone needs to push back. She's been awful to everyone around here, like she thinks buying a plot next to the lake means she owns the whole thing. That was all I needed to dig deeper into how Anna Dramanest had ended up in our quiet corner of the world. But this time, I wasn't just collecting info. I filed a formal complaint with the county over boundary violations, backed it with survey overlays, GPS coordinates, and every statute I could find. And what I discovered was infuriating. The company that sold Anna the land, a premier waterfront property, had a shady business model that was just this sign of fraudulent. They targeted wealthy city buyers, sold them waterfront dreams, and made vague promises about lake access and building rights they didn't actually have the authority to guarantee. Their process was simple: close the deal, take their cut, then disappear, leaving the new owners to battle over permits and legality later. In Anna's case, Premier had clearly implied she could build anything she wanted. What they failed to mention, she'd need the actual lake owner's consent before extending any structure into the water. Then I made a call to the county office. A clerk there let something slip. Anna had filed for a dock permit, but it was still pending and never finalized. The more I uncovered, the more it became clear. She wasn't just entitled, she was also misled, and instead of admitting she'd made a mistake, Anna had doubled down, rushing construction forward, threatening people, and hiding behind expensive lawyers. She believed if she acted confident enough, fast enough, and threw enough money at the problem, she could retroactively force her project into legitimacy. I almost felt bad for her, but then I remembered the intimidation tactics, the private guards, and the false police reports. And all that pity disappeared. As I kept pressing her on permits and legality, always politely, always on record, Anna began to crack. Her moves became sloppy, desperate. First came the bribe, though of course she'd never call it that. One evening she showed up at my door holding a bottle of fancy wine and a too-sweet smile. "Let's be neighbors," she said, voice syrupy. "I'll even name the dock after your grandfather, the Harold Mallister Memorial Pier. Doesn't that sound nice?" I told her naming it wasn't the issue. She still needed permission from me. That smile vanished like a switch had flipped. "You're making a big mistake," she snapped, voice going cold. "I have connections you can't even imagine, people who could make your life very complicated if you keep pushing this." She was threatening me on my own porch. Unbelievable. That's when I knew for sure, this wasn't about a dock. It was about standing up to someone who thought money made her untouchable. So I started documenting everything, every phone call, every visit, every hammer swing on that illegal dock. I bought a high-end camera with a telephoto lens and started taking daily time-stamped photos, noise logs, working hours, environmental impact reports. I filed formal complaints with every agency I could think of: the building department, the EPA, the Water Management District. Most of them went nowhere, swallowed by bureaucratic limbo, but I didn't care. I was building a trail of evidence, one she couldn't erase. What struck me most during this time was how isolated Anna had made herself. She hadn't just alienated me, she'd burned bridges with the entire neighborhood. The construction crews were terrified of her. Local officials were sick of her arrogance. Even the neighbors who might have supported her at first were fed up with the way she bulldozed through everyone. But going up against someone like Anna Dramanest, a wealthy, connected, relentless. It wasn't going to be easy. I had documentation. I had facts. I had the moral high ground. But I was starting to wonder, a broken bar, would it be enough? Because if this escalated, I'd be looking at years of litigation and thousands of dollars in legal fees, all over a dock. Was I really ready for that kind of fight? Was it worth it? Or was I just trying to prove a point? Looking back now, I probably should have known the answer to that question. But at the time, I kept wavering. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was still a way to resolve things without escalating into an all-out legal war. I printed out the entire email thread and slid it into a thick folder. If Anna Dramanest wanted a war, I was bringing both fiery and paperwork. Still, I knew I needed backup, real backup, the kind that came with legal credentials and a deep understanding of property law. But finding the right lawyer for this kind of fight wasn't just a matter of searching online. I needed someone who specialized in land use, water rights, and ideally I had experience handling aggressive, entitled personalities like the one living across the lake. After some digging and a few recommendations, I found him, Russell Briggs, a seasoned property attorney in his 60s whose entire practice revolved around land disputes and HOA wars. His office was tucked inside a converted Victorian house about an hour from the lake, and from the moment I walked through the door, I knew I was in the right place. The walls were cluttered with newspaper clippings from past victories, and the place practically hummed with quiet intensity. Russell greeted me with a firm handshake and led me to a large conference table. Then he went to work. He reviewed everything in my deed, the permits, the photographs, the emails, printouts, spreading the documents across the table with a kind of disciplined precision that instantly put me at ease. He didn't rush. He examined every line, every timestamp. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "Son," he said, shaking his head slowly, "you've got what we call a slam dunk. She's building on your property without consent. She's ignored multiple official notices, and her permits, incomplete, unenforceable. Any one of these violations could win this in court. All three. This shouldn't even go to trial." Then his tone shifted, more serious. "But be ready. People like Anna Dramanest don't go quietly. She'll fight dirty, and she'll do everything she can to drag this out and bleed you dry in the process." His legal strategy was refreshingly clear and methodical. He broke it down into 3 angles, sketching it out on a yellow legal pad. First, she's trespassing and causing property damage, a classic case. Second, she's violating county regulations by proceeding without valid permits. And third, her waterfront construction section is legally incomplete. That permit should have never been considered, let alone acted on. Russell estimated that a cease and desist letter from his office would likely be enough to stop the build immediately, and if not, we could seek a court-ordered removal of the illegal dock, possibly without ever setting foot in a courtroom. "The law's entirely on your side," he told me. "The only question now is whether she's smart enough to realize that or stubborn enough to drag this all the way." The cease and desist letter he drafted was a thing of cold, professional beauty. Gone was any hint of diplomacy or neighborly compromise. It was a legal sledgehammer, clearly outlining every infraction, what she needed to do to rectify it, and what penalties she'd face if she didn't. Cease all construction activities immediately, remove all structures extending into the lake, restore the shoreline to its original condition. Failure to comply within 7 days will result in court action seeking injunctive relief, monetary damages, and full recovery of legal costs. Reading that letter gave me a small, undeniable thrill. After weeks of being bullied, gaslit, and threatened, it felt good to finally hold some power, a real power backed by law. I wondered, would she take the settlement route, or dig in and fight to the bitter end? Turns out, Anna wasn't ready to surrender. She came back with reinforcements. 3 men in expensive suits stood at the edge of the dock beside her, briefcases in hand. If one lawyer couldn't intimidate me, she'd bring an entire team. "Everything's been reviewed and authorized," she shouted across the water, smug as ever. "Maybe you're the one who didn't read the bylaws closely enough." One of her attorneys stepped forward and handed me an envelope, a cease and desist letter from the HOA's legal team. "You've been formally notified," he said, voice flat. "Any interference with the dock will be treated as vandalism." I was stunned. They were trying to flip the script, make me the villain in a battle over my own property. But the news didn't stay contained for long. Word of our legal showdown spread fast through local Facebook groups and neighborhood forums. The community rallied in surprising numbers. People started sharing their own stories of dealing with Anna Dramanest and the overreach of the HOA. And let's just say, sympathy for her was in short supply. Most people were thrilled someone was finally standing up to her. The public attention seemed to rattle Anna more than any legal letter had. She thrived on private intimidation and quiet threats behind closed doors. But now, her name and actions were being openly discussed, criticized, mocked. She wasn't ready for that kind of spotlight. That night, Rachel called me. She'd overheard Anna Dramanest yelling at someone over speakerphone, "I don't care what the zoning map says, just stall him." After that, I noticed the construction activity had slowed considerably. The security guards vanished too. Whether her lawyer advised her to pause or she was simply running out of cash, I didn't know, but Russell warned me, this was likely just a calm before the storm. She's going to get more aggressive now, he predicted grimly. People like her don't give up quietly. She's probably already shopping for another lawyer, someone who might spot an angle we haven't considered. He was right, absolutely right. The very next morning, I discovered my mailbox smashed like someone had taken a baseball bat to it, and fresh tire tracks scarred my lawn. Nothing that could legally tie back to Anna Dramanest, of course, but the message, crystal clear. She wasn't going to let a cease and desist letter dictate terms. She was going to make my life hell if that's what it took. I took photos of everything, added them to the growing folder I'd started the day this all began. If she wanted to play outside the rules, fine, I'd meet her there too. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. What was she planning next? The answer came the following morning, a letter left on my deck. The HOA was accusing me of trespassing on my own shoreline. Then came the media attention. It started innocently enough. A young journalist named Sean Everett had seen the online chatter in local Facebook groups and thought the story might make a compelling human interest piece. Early 30s, worked for a regional paper, and had that unmistakable look of someone chasing their first real headline. He approached me one afternoon while I was taking photos of the construction. "This sounds like a classic David versus Goliath story," he said. "I think people would care about this. Would you be open to an interview?" I hesitated. The idea of media involvement made me uneasy, but maybe public pressure would finally tip the scales. Maybe people needed to know what was really happening on this lake. Before Sean could even start writing, Anna tried to shut the whole thing down. She went directly to his editor, clearly unaware that Sean had already spoken with me, and tried to kill the story at the source. According to what Sean later told me, she called the newspaper office and wasted no time reminding them that her HOA was a significant advertiser. "I'd hate to see our advertising relationship damaged by poor editorial decisions," she'd said. She suggested that maybe their reporter should focus on more positive community stories instead of stirring up unnecessary drama. I was furious. She wasn't just trying to rewrite the narrative, she was trying to buy silence. Fortunately, Sean's editor had a backbone. He didn't like being threatened, not even a little. He told Sean to proceed and make sure the piece was thoroughly documented. Meanwhile, I filed a formal notice of non-compliance with the Department of Natural Resources, citing illegal shoreline modifications by Anna Dramanest. The legal side wasn't taking a break, and neither was I. The article was published a few days later, and it was everything I'd hoped for. The headline read, "Local man battles HOA president over family lake rights." Sean laid out the entire story with calm, objective clarity. He included interviews with neighbors, cited legal documents, and even published a few photos of the ongoing construction. It wasn't hard to tell who was in the wrong. He also noted Anna's attempt to interfere with the story. Mrs. Carroll declined to comment for this article, but did contact this newspaper's advertising department to express concerns about its coverage. I placed a large sign at the end of the dock, "Unauthorized structure under review." Even if it didn't have legal weight, it definitely rattled her team. The public's response was immediate and overwhelmingly in my favor. The online comment section was packed with stories of HOA abuse and sympathy for my situation. One commenter wrote, "This is exactly why people hate HOAs. They think they own your land." Another said, Good for this guy for standing up to her. Someone needs to put these bullies in their place. Dozens of people echoed those same sentiments. Some even shared their own run-ins with Anna Dramanest since she'd arrived in the neighborhood. And reading through all of that and seeing that support from strangers was a broken bar validating. For the first time, I began to wonder if I'd been naive thinking reason and legality could win against someone like her. But the media attention changed something in Anna. It triggered a side of her I hadn't seen before. She seemed to lose her grip entirely. Joanne completely unraveled once the Anna Dramanest drama went public. Just a few days after the article hit circulation, I was picking up groceries when she cornered me in the parking lot, agitated, wild-eyed, and clearly not thinking about who might be watching. "You're destroying my reputation over a stupid shoreline," she shouted, loud enough that nearby shoppers paused mid-step. "Everything I've built, you're tearing it down with your lies and media stunts." I kept my tone even. "If you didn't want the attention, maybe you shouldn't have built illegally on someone else's land." But reasoning with her was pointless as she wasn't there to talk. She was unraveling. Earlier that week, a neighbor had offered to help me out. I said he couldn't stand how Anna Dramanest operated, either. But later that night, I saw his truck parked outside Joanne's garage. Typical. What Joanne didn't realize, though, was that Rachel had been in the grocery store lot too, and she'd started filming the second voices were raised. The footage showed Joanne absolutely losing it, screaming while I stood there trying to de-escalate the situation. You could see bystanders edging away, uncomfortable. Rachel uploaded the video with the caption, "Anna Dramanest president loses it over lake dispute." It didn't take long before the clip went viral. Hundreds of shares within hours. And the comments? Even more brutal than the newspaper's comment section. "This woman is clearly unstable. She shouldn't be running a HOA, let alone a Dramanest. Look how calm he is while she's yelling. Says everything you need to know." But I wasn't just relying on social media. My engineering background kept me focused on the practical side of things too. The dock? It was a structural disaster waiting to happen. Sloppy work, rushed materials. The foundation pilings were jokey and no way they'd hold up once storm season hit. I flagged it again to the county inspector. "The pilings aren't sufficient for storm conditions," I wrote. "There's a real safety risk here. I strongly recommend a full inspection before construction continues." The inspector replied politely. I basically said their hands were tied unless the property owner herself requested the inspection. And of course, Joanne wasn't about to do that. She was full steam ahead. But nature doesn't care about stubborn people. By the time summer started giving way to fall, the wind was shifting literally and legally. After weeks of complaints and documentation, the county finally sent someone out. The inspector spent hours reviewing the dock and left behind a formal cease construction notice, citing multiple violations. For the first time since this whole mess began, the construction stopped. But Joanne didn't give up. She brought in a high-priced attorney from the city to challenge the enforcement. She wasn't just fighting me anymore, she was going after the county, too. Even her own Anna Dramanest members were starting to push back. Rachel attended their latest board meeting and reported the shift. What should have been a simple chat about community issues turned tense fast. One resident stood up and said, "Joanne, this dock situation is embarrassing. It's all anyone in town talks about. Why not just take it down and move on?" Joanne's response? Total shutdown. "This is an internal Anna Dramanest matter," she said coldly. "And anyone who disagrees with the board's decision is welcome to find another neighborhood." She couldn't have said anything worse. That was the moment her fragile support base started to crumble. Within a day, a local blog ran the headline, "Anna Dramanest dock encroaches on private shoreline." At first, I didn't think much of it, just another post, but then a regional news station picked it up. By morning, the shoreline was packed with kayaks. A guy even live-streamed the entire perimeter, narrating like it was a documentary. Joanne must have realized she was cornered. That Sunday, she came to my house. No makeup, no expensive blazer, no smug expression, just tired eyes and a voice that was almost human. "Wyatt, please," she said. "I've put everything I have into this. The cabin, the dock. I can't lose it all now. What would it take to fix this?" I told her what I'd been saying for months. Remove the dock, restore my shoreline, apologize publicly. Her face went slack. like I'd suggested surgery without anesthesia. "I can't," she whispered. "It'll ruin me, financially, socially, completely." She was still looking for a loophole, but the only thing coming was a storm, a real one. The weather report warned of a major system forming offshore. A perfect convergence of winds and pressure headed our way with 70 miles per hour gusts and storm surge inland. The bulletin read like a prophecy. Structures not properly anchored or up to code are at high risk. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. If they could twist my private shoreline into shared space, what else could be redefined? I thought about the dock's flimsy pilings, the warnings I'd sent, and how no one wanted to listen. So I sent one last message to Joanne, to the county. "The dock structure is not rated for extreme weather. Strongly recommend removal or emergency reinforcement before the storm arrives." But I already knew what was going to happen. Anna ignored my final warning. The county replied saying they couldn't enforce any action while litigation was pending. "If you were me, would you have tried to save the dock or let nature make the final call?" Rachel sent me a clip she'd quietly recorded at an Anna Drama Nest board meeting. Anna's voice was sharp, almost emotionless. "If the permit's not valid, I don't care. We just need 2 more weeks and a storm. That'll solve our problem for us." And the storm came right on cue. Tuesday night, late September. It was exactly as bad as the meteorologists had predicted. I spent the whole day locking things down on my property, but once the sun set, there was nothing left to do but wait. By midnight, the wind howled like something alive, rain came down in violent sheets, and the trees cracked and groaned like they were screaming. Around 2 a.m., the power went out, but the worst sound wasn't the wind or the trestle, it was the lake. Waves bigger than I'd ever seen slammed against the shoreline, and then I heard Ida again and again of this low, awful creaking sound. It had to be the dock. Each wave seemed to pull it harder, like the lake was trying to rip it away. At 3 a.m., I heard a new sound, a long, deep groan, followed by a deafening crackle like a giant plank splitting down the middle. I ran to the window with a flashlight, but the rain was too thick and the dark too complete to see clearly. Still, I could feel it. The dock was coming loose. It swayed with each wave, shifting unnaturally. The anchors weren't holding. I stood there for 20 minutes watching, waiting, wondering if this was the moment Anna Drama Nest's illegal dock finally met its end. And when dawn came, so did the answer. The clouds broke just enough for me to see the aftermath. The dock had broken completely free. It was floating in the middle of the lake, drifting like a ghost ship. A $500,000 structure, now just a very expensive piece of aimless debris. Deck boards, railings, lawn furniture, all scattered across the water. It looked like the remains of a shipwreck. Except this wasn't the sea, it was a lake, and the ship was a dock that should never have been built. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the edge of the water. I didn't push it. I didn't sabotage anything. I just untied the slack line holding it to a rusted post and let it float. Gravity, weather, nature took care of the rest. By sunrise, it was gone. 30 minutes later, Anna arrived, heels sinking into mud, screaming into her phone. Someone filmed her from a canoe. The video was titled, "Queen of Anna Drama Nest Loses Her Throne." 40,000 views in 2 hours. An hour later, she came back again, this time still in pajamas, hair soaked, face pale. When she saw the dock floating away, the sound she made was something between a scream and a sob. "What did you do?" she yelled, as if I'd conjured the storm myself. "What did you do to my dock?" I stayed calm. I reminded her of the emails, the warnings, the engineering concerns. I told her again that her foundation pilings weren't rated for storm conditions. "You ignored everything," I said. But she wasn't hearing anything. "You planned this, you sabotaged it, you ruined my life," she shrieked. Honestly, I felt sorry for her for half a second, watching her dreams float away like trash. But then I remembered everything she'd done, every threat, every lie, every illegal move. The county building inspector showed up a few hours later. He walked the shoreline, examined the debris, and looked over the dock remains bobbing in open water. His words were clear and final. "Ma'am, this was a textbook structural failure. Anchor points were inadequate. The engineering didn't meet code, and we've got formal documentation from the adjacent property owner stating all of this weeks ago. He handed her copies of my emails. "This structure never should have been built with that foundation system," he said. Anna just stood there, whimpering, eyes locked on the ruin. $1 million dock. Gone. Not by sabotage, not by politics, by rain, wind, and bad planning. By mid-morning, the fire department arrived to assess whether the drifting dock was a navigation hazard. After consulting marine regulations, they deemed retrieval too risky. Since the dock was now in a public waterway, it was considered marine debris and no longer Anna's responsibility, or property. A local news chopper captured stunning aerial footage. Rachel stood next to me, holding her phone up. "They're watching this live," she whispered. I didn't smile, but I didn't look away either. That evening, I watched the news broadcast. The anchor's voice was steady as he narrated. What was once a luxury dock now drifts downstream, a casualty of poor design, legal hubris, and Mother Nature. They called it the floating disaster of Andromeda. And just like that, Anna's empire sank. Debris removal, lawsuits from downstream residents whose properties might be affected by her floating dock, and the total loss of her so-called investment. That's what Joanne was left with. "She's financially ruined," Russell told me over the phone later that week. The county slapped her with $60,000 in fines for violations. Her high-powered city lawyer walked off the case when she couldn't pay his fees. And if that dock damages anything on its way to the ocean, she's liable for all of it. Turns out, if you build illegal structures with poor engineering and zero permits, and they end up harming others, you're responsible. Who would have thought? Within 2 weeks of the storm, a for sale sign appeared in front of Joanne's unfinished lake cabin. The asking price dropped 3 times in a month. A desperation dressed up as motivated seller. I watched from across the lake as moving trucks came and went, one by one hauling away what was left of her lakefront fantasy. The day she finally left for good, she stood silently next to the bare foundation where her dock had once been anchored, just staring at the water, at nothing. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She'd made every wrong choice she could, but still. It's hard watching someone's entire illusion drift away. Rachel came up beside me. "Think she learned anything?" she asked. I paused. "Doubt it. People like Joanne don't think they were wrong, they just think they got unlucky." But as the last moving truck disappeared down the hill, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. I'm standing at my lake now, telling you this. The sun setting, painting the water gold. The only sound is birds and wind in the trees. No more hammers, no more threads, no more hoe tantrums, just calm. The shoreline is back to how it should be: natural, quiet, mine. Did I destroy her dock? Nope. Mother Nature did that. Did I warn every Joanne, the county, the builder? Yes. Documented. All of it. Do I feel bad watching her dream break apart and float toward the Atlantic? Her cabin is still here, but her dock, her control, her ego, that's long gone. I almost felt bad, almost, but not enough to regret protecting my home, my peace, or my family's legacy. Sometimes, the best revenge is no revenge at all, just letting people collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. That dock's probably in the ocean by now, and somewhere out there, a bunch of confused fish are circling their new $500,000 artificial reef. And me? I'm right where I belong, finally living in peace. Later that night, I sat on the shore, mist rising from the lake, rain dripping from an empty post. It was quiet, really quiet, calming, even. Maybe that's the real lesson. Sometimes, when you stand up for what's right, you don't need to fight. Nature takes care of the rest. If you're still with me, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. And if this story spoke to you, don't forget to hit the thanks button to support Andromeda. Catch you in the next one. Buckle up. The next story, even twistier.